Okay, so this is Glenn Pendlay, and I'm here with Rudy Nielsen, and we just started to have a discussion about something I think is actually kind of interesting, and that is the ideal technique on the snatch and clean when you're trying to go for a max weight. The same technique, if you were that would be ideal if you were trying to do an anaerobic endurance workout like a CrossFit workout where you did 30 clean and jerks or 30 snatches as quick as you can. I think that they might not be the same technique. I think that starting with your hips fairly low is more efficient, allows you to use your legs better and to lift heavier weight. But then you also have the fact that you are raising a significantly greater portion of your body weight up and down, as opposed to maybe starting with your hips very high and your back more parallel to the ground. You don't have all the metabolic work of raising your hips. So Rudy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, first, Coach, I'd like to say that I don't like that you're using your big boy voice on me. I feel fairly inadequate from a baritonal. Is that a word?
I don't think that's a word, but I think it gets the idea across.
Okay, from a baritonal standpoint, I feel fairly inadequate. Even though my beard is a hair longer, I still feel that the depth of voice that you're using on me is not appropriate. So maybe you could lighten it up a little bit.
I will just go ahead and change my vocal cords right away.
Okay,
look, you got to go with what you got, Rudy. I mean,
you know what? Evidently, I need more. I don't know, testosterone or something.
We all need a little extra.
So, from a technique standpoint, I obviously having a hand in both sports, kind of, and seeing thousands of workouts over the years that are done with barbells. I do feel that there's a difference in technique. I wouldn't. It's hard to teach that as a coach. It's hard to tell somebody that, some sort of a breaking of technique is appropriate at any given time. Typically our lifters that are the best technical lifters are not always the best in a Metcon setting.
Well, I mean, let me interrupt you there for just 1 second, but I mean, I think that probably has more to do with how good of a lifter they are. And, if you get a guy that their snatch, let's say, is 80% of their deadlift, they are going to, whether they want to or not, they're going to fire off a lot of motor units when they do a snatch, even if it's a reasonably light snatch. Compare that to somebody whose snatch is 50% of their deadlift. And that person is kind of is not even able to use, anywhere near maximum motor units when they do a snatch, And so it might just be the great snatcher is just great at using a high amount of motor units and is going to do so one way or the other, and the bad snatcher isn't. I mean, that would be a little bit different issue than one technique having a lower metabolic cost, maybe not as strong for maximal effort, but a lower metabolic cost for, multiple efforts, whereas another technique might be great for a one max, but when you're doing 30 in a row, it has a higher metabolic cost.
Well, the weird thing for me is that the way that we teach when we go out and do seminars, the way we teach our athletes is we always want to develop that perfect technique because, like you said, we always want to end up being able to recruit as much force as we can. We always want to be able to move in a manner to where it has transfer to everything else. We always want our lifters to be able to just develop force better, or our athletes to develop force better. There's a certain, for me, there's a certain percentage where if I've got Elizabeth Akinwale with 95 pounds on the bar, then we're talking 45% of her 1 rep max. Then it becomes sort of a different animal. She can almost do anything with the bar as long as it's not taxing in some way where it shouldn't be, as long as she's not pressing out with her shoulders, as long as she's not, pulling earlier or anything like that. When we get into that sort of 60 to 70% range, that tends to be where the CrossFitters really do very well. And that range is sort of where you need a little bit of technique, but if something gets a little bit out of place, it's not gonna kill you. So while we always harp and always want to teach and develop perfect technique, there's a little bit of
wiggle room there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of wiggle room on a high rep workout, and that wiggle room tends to be less for the better lifters, right? So like you said, the better the lifter is, usually they can't break technique too much and still be successful. And ironically, usually the worse the lifter is, then they can, just fire away 10 reps kind of however. But our big thing is we always make sure the back's set right. We always make sure that they stay over the bar. We always make sure that, they're turning the bar over quickly. There's no press out or anything like that, because those are the kind of things that from a lactic loading standpoint and things like that tend to be detrimental to those kind of workouts.
Yeah, those things are going to tire you out.
Yeah.
No matter what percentage you're working with. What about the question that I mentioned earlier about loading or lifting a higher percentage of your body weight through a longer range of motion when you use a lower hip start versus someone who just bends over and picks it up?
Well,
they're using they're doing less actual metabolic work because their hips are staying high and they're not raising the mass of their body as much.
So there's sort of two thoughts there. So not to use Elizabeth again as an example, but on 12-3 last year or 12-2 last year, the snatch workout, she scored 91 reps in the time cap. I think it was 10 minutes or 12 minutes. I can't remember. She scored 91 reps. This year on 13-1, she scored 94 reps, I believe, with something like a minute and a half less. And her entire if you watch the video of the workout, you can hear me yelling at her hips down the entire time. Because last year it was basically just a row, flat, back flat to the ground, and her shoulders fatigued and she was gone. So while she moved slower this year early on, she scored far better, right? Now she's one of those lifters that tends to get the hips up early. You've seen her. She tends to get the hips up early. She tends to have a fairly flat torso, etc. There's a lot of our guys, like, dependent on body structure, that can sort of get into a bad position, and it doesn't hinder them as much as it would somebody like her. So I think a lot of it is based on the athlete. I don't think there's like a if you do this, it's going to penalize you, right? But there's certainly certain things that when they go wrong in the workout, it's going to penalize you no matter what. Obviously, any kind of press out with the shoulder. If we're talking about the snatch, any kind of press out with the shoulders. If we're talking about the clean, any sort of positional problem on the catch is going to end up fatiguing the quads.
You're going to have to grind it out instead of bouncing up. Yeah.
So there's a for me, it's, if I had to put a number on it, it's 90 to 95% technique, right? I need my guys on a high rep, on an 80% workout, 70% workout. I need 90% technique for them to be successful. Anything that breaks off from that, they're not going to be successful anymore.
I heard somebody mention to me, and I guess I don't watch enough CrossFit workouts to really be able to comment intelligently on this.
You don't like watching like 12 minutes of burpees?
No.
That's not enjoyable for you?
No, it's probably less enjoyable to watch than it is for the athlete doing it.
I don't know if you knew this. It's on ESPN now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is it really? Well, I don't even know what channel ESPN is on my.
It's on the Ocho. So
I had to actually look up and down the channel chart on TV to find the NCAA Division I wrestling tournament. But I did find it for that and made sure I watched as much as I could of that, which was all of it.
Didn't they ban wrestling or something like that?
It's not banned. It's just they're supposedly they're having it in the 2016 Olympics, and then after that, there's a chance that it won't be in any more Olympics unless, what they do is they vote for a sport to be so-called on the chopping block.
And wrestling's what they chose.
One of the original Olympic sport, if there is one, wrestling, track and field, weightlifting, those types of sports are what
I believe it was called pancrase. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, that was, back in the Greek days.
And they killed each other, am I right?
They killed each other, yeah.
Well, yeah, why can't forget it.
Well, in the modern Olympics, though, wrestling is obviously one of the original sports in the modern Olympics, too. But what they do is they vote to put a sport on the chopping block. And then that sport goes into a pool of 7 or 8 new sports that they're considering putting into the Olympics. And then after a year of public outcry and, voting and whatever, they then take say there's one sport on the chopping block and 7 new sports. And then they decide to put one of those new sports in the next Olympics. So they could decide to go ahead and keep, synchronized whatever that stupid sport is that, rollerblading or skateboarding or some skateboarding sport up. To have that in the Olympics.
Is rollerblading in the Olympics?
I don't know. They're probably considering it. I have no idea. But they could conceivably, out of that group of 8, of which 7 of them are stupid, ridiculous new sports that nobody even cares about.
Team handball. That's a good one.
Team handball. I think team handball's in the Olympics.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was a great move for them to put that in.
That was a wonderful move. But then they can vote one of those 8 sports back into the Olympics. So if wrestling beats out all the synchronized, BS that's being considered and roller skating or whatever, then wrestling can come back into the Olympics and be there in 2020. But to do that, it has to beat out all those other stupid sports, which I think should be fairly easy. But then, from a logical standpoint, what fits the Olympics better, skateboarding or wrestling?
Skateboarding.
Oh, Rudy, you're just trying to piss me off. How did we get onto that subject?
I have no.
We were talking about,
I don't even remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about snatches and clean and jerks.
I don't know.
I'm kind of at a loss here, but no, I don't know. So, we talked about ESPN and me watching.
Oh yeah.
But I was discussing this issue with somebody, and they said that they had noticed that one of the workouts that they had watched in the Open, the person, whoever the person was, and I think it was the Open this year, whatever, it was a CrossFit workout, whatever. They had noticed that as they started their snatch ladder with a relatively light weight, they were lifting with their hips real high and just very rudimentary throwing it up. And then as the weight got heavier and they got more fatigued in order to keep hitting the weight, they got their hips lower and lower and lower. And by the time they were at their, heaviest weight and fatigued, they were starting with what would be considered a great start position in an Olympic weightlifting competition. But the thought was that they were, conserving energy, doing the weight with a light weight at as low a metabolic cost as they could. And as the weight got heavier and they needed to, they slowly switched to a stronger start position. So I'm wondering is that something you've ever coached?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you put a 45-pound bar in, or I can't remember what the men's opening weight was. I think it was 75 pounds. You put a 75-pound bar in Daniel Tominski's hands, he snatches 290, right? So he doesn't.
He's just trying to get it over his head with as little movement.
Yeah,
as
it's
possible.
not even a snatch at that point. It's a put the bar overhead, right? So the key for us is like you said, when that bar gets heavier, we need our guys to be able to turn it over and catch it, right? So, and we need them to be able to do that with the cleanest possible technique. Now, you know this.
And so to do that, you have to slowly get your hips lower and lower where you can produce
more power.
Now,
so the other problem with this is, and this is something you would be completely unfamiliar with, but once you sort of load lactically and the hips are fatigued and, your body starts to get to that point where.
Are you trying to say I've never had my hips fatigued, Rudy?
No. I believe I wouldn't be the person to know that, Coach. Now I forgot what I was saying. When they get to that point where their body starts to kind of shut down from not from a neurological standpoint, but from a muscular fatigue standpoint, that pulling under the barbell becomes unbelievably difficult. If you've fatigued the shoulders early in the workout and you've got to go now to let's say a 70% load or 65% load, whatever it may be, and now you're trying to fall into a beautiful, perfect technique snatch, it becomes incredibly difficult, and it becomes one of those things where